I have instructed at the thrashing hall for 41 cycles. In that time, I have certified 1,100 cadets fit for forward deployment and signed the deactivation orders on 309 who were not. I do not write this to defend myself. I write it because the conservatory has asked every instructor of standing to set down, in their own carapace hand, what they saw on the day the human cadet ran the lane we built to break the unbreakable. The official record is accurate as far as it goes. It does not go far enough. So I will tell it the way it happened to me, who stood at the observation slit the whole time and was wrong about everything until the last second of it. My name is Sale Coravan. I am of the Vetch caste, the Blue Chitinous, the warrior instructors who hold the line between a cadet's ambition and the grave that ambition will dig if it is not corrected. We are not a kind people. Kindness in this work kills students. We are exact. We measure, we record, we cull, and the galaxy is steadier for it. I should explain the hall because the conservatory's younger readers will know it only by reputation, and the reputation has softened it into legend. The thrashing hall is not a legend. It is a building. It is a long, low structure of poured composite and field emitters set into the rock of an airless training moon, and it exists for one purpose, which is to find out the truth about a cadet before a battlefield finds it out for them. There is no glory in the place. The corridors are gray. The lighting is the flat institutional cyan we use, because it does not tire the compound eye over a long shift. The cadets sleep in tiered cells and eat in a mess hall that smells, always, of the protein slurry. The kitchen runs for the species that cannot metabolize anything finer. It is a working building, and the work is grim, and the people who do the work are grim, and that is correct, because the alternative to a grim building that measures cadets honestly is a cheerful one that sends them to the line believing things about themselves that are not true. The scale is the heart of it. I have said the placement engine rates each cadet 1 to 40, and that is true, but the number means more than a lane assignment. The number is a prophecy. It tells the instructing caste, before the cadet has lifted a hand, exactly how much reality the cadet can absorb before reality breaks them. We have refined the scale over 900 cycles. It is the single most reliable instrument in the field. A cadet rated 16 will, with rare and explicable exceptions, fail at a stress load of 16 and survive a load of 15, and we deploy them to postings calibrated to that ceiling, and the casualty figures across the whole instructed galaxy bear the scale out to a precision that I, as a young adjunct, found almost frightening in its certainty. The scale does not flatter. The scale does not forgive. The scale is the closest thing my caste has to a god, and like a god it had never, in my lifetime, been wrong in a way that mattered. This is the thing I need to establish before I tell the rest, because, if you do not understand how completely we trusted the scale, you cannot understand how completely we were unprepared for the morning it lied to us, or rather, and this is the correction I have spent the cycles since learning to make. The morning it told us a truth we were too certain to read. The human arrived in a transfer manifest of 400 cadets from the Colonial Rim intake. The manifest is generated by the placement engine, which assigns each cadet a threshold value, a single number 1 to 40, that predicts the highest survivable stress lane the cadet may be safely run through. A cadet rated threshold 6 runs the 6 lane. A cadet rated threshold 30 runs the 30. No cadet has ever been rated above 34. The thrashing hall was built to 40 as a courtesy to engineers who like round numbers. The human's manifest entry read, designation unparsed, origin world cataloged as a Class 19 environment under the old survey, threshold value, and here the engine had done something it had never done in my 41 cycles, threshold value blank. Not 0. Blank. The field that the engine fills for every living thing it has ever processed, it had left empty for her. I took this to the hall prefect, an old vetch named Drusk Maravan whose mandibles had gone gray at the hinge, and who had certified cadets before my egg was laid. He looked at the blank field for a long moment with all 4 of his eyes, and then did the thing that I now understand was the first mistake, the small one, the one that made all the others possible. He laughed, a dry clicking the vetch laugh. Clerical error, he said. The engine choked on a Class 19 origin, old survey junk. Assign her a provisional and let the lane sort her. A provisional of what value, Prefect? He looked at the cadet roster on the slate. The human stood in the holding yard with the other intake, and the imaging caught her clearly. Small, even by the standards of the soft species, the smallest cadet in the manifest by a clear margin. Dark fur on the head cropped short. A flat, unalarming face. She was looking at the hall's outer wall the way a surveyor looks at terrain, and I noted that and then dismissed it, because every frightened cadet stares at the wall before their first lane, and I had seen 10,000 of them do it. I want to be precise about what I saw, because precision is the only honest thing I have to offer this account. She was not staring at the wall the way the frightened ones stare. The frightened ones stare to avoid the eyes of the instructors and the other cadets. Their gaze fixes on a point and goes glassy and inward. Her gaze was not inward. It moved. It tracked along the seam where the wall met the floor, then up to the emitter housing set into the ceiling, then back down to the drainage grates, and there was a quality to the movement that I had seen before but could not place that morning and can place now. It was the gaze of someone counting exits. Someone who had learned somewhere that the first thing you do in any new enclosure is establish how it would try to kill you and how you would answer. I saw it. I logged it as nerves. The cost of that misfiling is the entire account that follows. Provisional threshold 38, Drusk said. I did not understand. 38, Prefect. We have never run anyone above 34. The 4 cadets we ran at 33 last cycle, 2 did not certify. You are assigning a Blankfield Colonial the second highest lane the hall has ever opened. He clicked again, slower. I am assigning a lesson, adjunct. The Colonial intakes come to us soft and proud. They have been told on their backwater worlds that they are special. The placement engine fails on her, and she will take that failure as confirmation that she is too rare to measure. So we will measure her. The 38 lane will not kill her. The medical cutoffs hold. The lane scales down the instant her vitals cross the line. It will only show her, precisely and without malice, exactly where she sits on the scale that governs everyone. She will wash out at, I would guess, 9 or 10, and she will spend the rest of her instruction grateful that we taught her humility before a battlefield taught it to her with no cutoff at all. I have replayed that exchange more times than I can count. There was no cruelty in it. That is what I need the conservatory to understand. Drusk Maravan was not a sadist. He was an exact man performing what he believed was a mercy, a controlled, monitored, survivable demonstration of a hard truth. He believed the scale. We all believed the scale. The scale had been right 1,100 times for me alone. The scale was the floor we stood on. I logged the assignment, provisional threshold 38. I attached my own note to the file because that is procedure and because some old caution in me wanted it on record. Recommend rerun of placement engine before lane execution. Drusk overrode the note with his prefect's seal. The lane would run on schedule. I went to find the human before the drill, which is also procedure. The assigning instructor briefs the cadet on the medical cutoffs so that they understand the lane will protect them even as it tries to break them. I found her in the holding yard, sitting apart from the other cadets, eating from a ration tin with a small folding tool. The other cadets gave her a wide berth, the way young things of one species will instinctively give room to a young thing of another they cannot read. I have watched intake yards for 41 cycles, and there is always a sorting that happens in the first hours, a settling of the young into clusters by species and temperament, and the human had not been sorted into any cluster. She sat alone. And it did not appear to trouble her, and the not being troubled was itself a thing the other cadets could sense and could not interpret, and so they widened the berth further. A frightened creature draws others toward it or repels them. Either way it registers as prey, and the young recognize prey. She registered as neither. She registered as something the room did not have a category for, and the room arranged itself around the gap. "Cadet," I said, "you have been assigned a provisional lane, threshold 38. I am required to brief you on the cutoffs." She finished the bite she was on before she answered, which I noted and again dismissed. 38, she said, on a scale to 40. Correct. And the highest anyone's actually run is 34. You will not be expected to complete the lane. You will be expected to attempt it until the medical sensors register distress, at which point the lane scales down automatically and the drill ends. This is for your protection. Do you understand the cutoffs? She looked up at me then. Her eyes were small and dark, and there was nothing in them that I could read as fear, which I attributed to ignorance. She did not yet know what a 38 lane was, so of course she was not afraid of it. Ignorance reads identical to courage right up until the lane corrects it. Adjunct Coravan, she said. She had read my name off my thorax plate, which most cadets are too rattled to do. What's the lane actually made of? Mechanically. What am I walking into? No cadet had ever asked me that. They ask how long, they ask if it hurts, they ask if anyone has died. They do not ask for the mechanical specification. I told myself she was stalling, and I answered her because the specification is not secret. Kinetic and energetic hazards on independent timing tracks, I said. Projectile lanes, pressure pulses, thermal gradients, a flooding sequence, low visibility intervals, and adversary drones rated to the lane's threshold. The hazards scale in intensity with the lane number. At 38, the timing tolerances are below what most species can perceive, let alone answer. The drones at 38 strike faster than a vetch can track. That is why no one runs it. She nodded slowly. She was not nodding in fear. She was, I realize now, filing it. Independent timing tracks, she repeated. So the hazards don't actually coordinate with each other. They just each run their own clock. They are not designed to coordinate. At 38 there is no need. Any one track is sufficient. How many tracks active at once? I did not understand why she was asking, but again, the specification is not secret. They overlap at the high thresholds. 2, sometimes 3 layered. The flooding and the pressure pulses run together by design. The drones run alone at the end because the drones do not require a second hazard to finish a cadet. And each track, once it starts its cycle, does the cycle ever change? Or does it run the same period start to finish? The period is fixed per track. The lane number sets the period. The period does not vary within a run. That is what makes it a calibrated instrument. A varying period would not measure anything. I said it as a point of professional pride, the way one explains the virtue of a good tool. I did not hear in my own mouth that I had just told her the lane was predictable. I heard a man explaining rigor to a creature who would shortly be on the medical floor. Why do you ask, Cadet? No reason, she said, in the flat colonial way they have. Just like to know what I'm working with. She went back to her ration tin, and I left her there because I had 11 other cadets to brief, and because I was certain, that I had just spoken to a creature who would be on the medical floor inside the first 40 seconds of the lane, washed out at single digits, exactly as Drusk had predicted. I felt no triumph about it. I felt the dull professional sorrow of a man who has seen too many proud young things meet the scale. I went to my other cadets. I want to be honest about the next part, because it is where the dread began, and I did not name it as dread at the time. The other 11 cadets I briefed that morning were ordinary intakes, 3 reptilian skarn, a pair of the gas-breathing Alu, some mid-rim humanoids. I ran their lanes through the day at their assigned thresholds, 12 and 14 and 1 ambitious 19, and they performed exactly as their numbers said they would. The Skarn certified. One of the Alu washed out at 11 and took it badly. The 19-lane humanoid certified by a margin so thin I nearly failed him on principle. Ordinary day. The scale held as it always held. The human's lane was scheduled last, in the late observation block, when the senior instructors gather at the slit to watch the high-threshold runs. There were 9 of us at the wall when they brought her in. Drusk was there, of course. He had told the others about the Blankfield Colonial and the lesson he intended, and there was a low clicking among the senior cast, the dry amusement of old instructors who have watched 1,000 colonials learn the scale. I will not pretend I stood apart from it. I clicked too. We were 9 exact men about to watch a small, soft creature be taught her place by a machine that had taught it to 10,000 others. I will name the 9 because they should be on the record as witnesses and not hidden inside my account. Drusk Maravan, the prefect. Vel Soren, the energetics instructor, who would be the first of us to say aloud what we were seeing. Korth Ven and Sierra Alu of the kinetics division. Old Melu, who ran the medical floor and had built half of it with his own hands. The twins Dreven and Drevek of the drone division, who would not speak at all for the duration and would resign their commissions within the cycle. Myself, and the prefect's adjutant, a young vetch named Isa Koravan, my own brood sister, who had asked to observe a high-threshold run for the first time and whom I had brought, thinking it would be instructive. It was instructive. It was not the instruction I intended. She entered the staging cell. Through the slit I watched her look at the chamber the way she had looked at the outer wall in the yard, a flat, methodical sweep, left to right, top to bottom, not the frantic scan of a cornered animal, the unhurried read of someone taking inventory. She looked at the emitter housings first, then the floor grates, then the gantry, then the far wall, and her gaze paused on the inner wall a moment longer than the rest, and I would not understand why until 2 seconds into the run, when I learned what was hidden there. The lane lead called the cutoffs aloud for the record. The human acknowledged. The lead asked if the cadet was ready. The human said one word. "Run it." Drusk gave the seal. The 38 lane opened. I have watched the 38 lane open in simulation. I had never watched a living body stand in front of it. The first hazard at 38 is a projectile track, a wall of kinetic rounds on a timing tolerance that, as I had told her, sits below the perception threshold of most species. The rounds are non-lethal at the medical floor, ceramic-skinned and pulled by field dampers, but they strike hard enough to break a limb and they come faster than thought. The lane is built so that a cadet at 38 cannot dodge the projectile track. It is built so that the cadet learns in the first 2 seconds that they are outside their threshold, and the medical sensors register the distress of that learning, and the lane scales down and the lesson is delivered. That is the design. That is what was supposed to happen. The human did not try to dodge the projectile track. She moved low and to the inner wall, the one place in the chamber where the projectile track's field dampers create a dead cone, a sliver of space perhaps a hand's width wide, where the rounds cannot be pulled to strike because the dampers would cancel each other. I did not know that dead cone existed. I had instructed at that hall for 41 cycles, and I did not know the projectile track had a dead cone, because no cadet had ever lived long enough inside the track to find it. She found it in under 2 seconds. She did not find it by luck. She found it by reading the damper field. I watched her watch the rounds, watched her track the way they curved, and understood, sickly, that she was not dodging the projectiles. She was reading the machine that fired them, and she had located its blind spot before the track completed its first cycle. I have run that footage at 1/40th speed since, many times alone in the archive, trying to find the instant of luck in it. Because if it was luck, then the scale held, and the world was the world I had spent 41 cycles believing in. There is no instant of luck in it. Slowed to where a vetch eye can follow, you can see her head turn a fraction toward each round as it fires. You can see her track the curvature. You can see the moment, at perhaps the 8th round, where she has gathered enough of the curve to solve the field. And then you can see her move, not toward where the rounds are, but toward where the math says they cannot be, and arrive there before the proof arrives, and stand in the proof while it forms around her. She did not survive the projectile track. She read it, solved it, and occupied the solution. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole of what I have to tell. At the wall, the clicking stopped. Sensor fault, Drusk said. The medical floor should have triggered. Check the floor. The lane lead checked the floor. Medical floor is nominal, Prefect. Cadet vitals are, he paused. Cadet vitals are elevated but within voluntary range. No involuntary distress. The lane has nothing to respond to. That is not possible, Drusk said. She is inside a 38 projectile track. She is inside the damper dead cone, I heard myself say. I did not remember deciding to speak. She found the dead cone. 8 sets of eyes came to me. There is no dead cone, Drusk said. There is, I said. She is standing in it. The projectile track completed its sequence and cycled down as it does to let the next hazard initialize. In the gap, the human moved. She did not move randomly. She moved to a new position, 3 steps, and crouched, and I watched her do it and could not understand why until the thermal gradient track initialized, and the chamber bloomed with heat, and the human was crouched at the exact seam where 2 thermal zones met, the narrow margin where the gradient cancels to survivable, the seam that the engineers who built the lane had told us did not meaningfully exist at 38 because no cadet could locate it in the half-second before the thermal track ramped. She had located it in the gap, while the projectile track was cycling down. She had spent the dead time between hazards reading the next hazard's geometry and prepositioning for it. She is anticipating the tracks, said Velsarin, the energetics instructor, in a voice I had never heard her use. Prefect, she is reading the timing of the tracks and moving into the gaps before they open. The tracks are on independent clocks, Drusk said. They are not coordinated. There is no pattern to read. There is no coordinated pattern, I said. The dread had a shape now and I was speaking around it. But each track is individually periodic. Each one runs its own clock and each clock is regular. She is not reading a combined pattern. She is reading each clock separately and solving them in parallel. Nothing solves 5 independent timing tracks in parallel, Drusk said. The cognitive load is beyond any species we instruct. It is beyond us. Then explain what we are watching, said Velsarin, and Drusk did not answer, because there was no answer that fit inside the scale. Beside me, my brood sister Isa had gone very still. She had observed nothing before this. She had no 40 cycles of certainty to lose, and so she was, of all of us at the wall, the only one seeing the thing cleanly, without the scale laid over it like a film. Adjunct, she said to me very quietly in the brood speech we use between us. She asked you the periods. In the yard, you said she asked for the specification. It was not a question. You told her the tracks were independent and the periods were fixed. You told her the lane was predictable because you were proud of how well it was built. I did not answer her because she was correct, and because the thing she had just assembled out loud was the thing I had spent the last 90 seconds refusing to assemble myself. I had not been briefing the human that morning. I had been handing her the schematic. Every word I had offered as a measure of the lane's impossibility, she had received as a parameter. The independence of the tracks, which I had named as their cruelty, she had named as their separability. The fixity of the periods, which I had named as the rigor of the instrument, she had named as the thing that made the instrument solvable. I had explained to her, in the patient voice of a man explaining a good tool to a creature he pitied, precisely how to defeat the tool. And she had thanked me in the flat colonial way and said she just liked to know what she was working with. I had told the human that morning that the hazards ran on independent timing tracks. I had told her, thinking it a description of how impossible the lane was, 5 separate clocks, no mercy of coordination, any one of them sufficient to break her. She had heard the same words and drawn the opposite conclusion. Independent clocks meant separable problems. Separable problems could be solved one at a time and held in memory together. What I had described as the lane's cruelty, she had heard as the lane's flaw. So this is what I meant in the yard when she asked for the mechanical specification, and I gave it to her freely because it was not secret. I had handed her the lane schematic and called it a warning, and she had taken it as a brief. The flooding sequence initialized. At 38, the flooding track fills the lower chamber faster than a body can climb, and the timing is set so that the cadet must choose between the rising water and the pressure pulse track that runs along the upper gantry. A deliberate trap, water below, pulses above, no safe elevation. The cadets who reach the flooding track in simulation freeze in the impossible choice, and the medical floor catches their panic and ends the lane. It is, the engineers say, the most psychologically punishing hazard in the hall. The human did not choose between the water and the pulses. She went into the water. She has panicked, Drusk said, and there was relief in it, the relief of a man whose floor is being restored beneath him. She is drowning. The medical floor will catch the drowning. The lane ends now. The human did not drown. She went under deliberately, below the pressure pulse track's lowest sweep, and she stayed under, and she moved along the flooded floor of the chamber where the pulses could not reach, holding her breath in a body that the medical readout told us was running low on oxygen but had not crossed into distress, because she was not panicking, because she had chosen the water, because she had calculated in the gap, always in the gap, that her species could hold its breath longer than the pressure pulse track's sweep would last, and that the water that was meant to trap her was in fact the only cover in the chamber from the hazard above it. Oxygen at 60%, the lane lead read. 55, 50, she is not surfacing, prefect if she does not surface. The medical floor, Velsorin said, the floor will catch the hypoxia. The floor catches involuntary distress, the lane lead said, and his voice had the flatness of a man reading something he does not want to read. Her distress markers are voluntary. She is holding her breath on purpose. The floor reads it as a choice. It will not intervene on a choice. Old Melu, who had built half the medical floor with his own hands, made a sound I had never heard him make. He leaned into the slit until his thorax pressed the composite. I designed the floor to find the moment a cadet loses themselves, he said, and there was something breaking in the back of his voice. The spike, the flood of it. Every living thing that has ever drowned in that chamber has drowned the same way. The body takes over, the panic comes, the markers spike, and the floor catches the spike and pulls them out before the body finishes what the panic started. 40 cycles. It has never missed. It cannot miss because the spike is involuntary, and involuntary means inevitable. He watched the small dark shape hold itself still at the bottom of the flooded chamber. She is not going to spike. She is not going to lose herself. The floor is waiting for a thing that is not coming, and I built it that way, and I do not know how to make it do anything else, because I never imagined a cadet who would simply decline to panic while drowning. We had built the medical floor to catch panic. We had not built it to catch a creature that did not panic. The floor was looking for the involuntary spike of a thing that has lost control, and the human had not lost control, and so to our sensors she was not in danger. She was simply, calmly, holding her breath at the bottom of a flooded chamber while a hazard built to break her swept harmlessly over the water. And our entire safety architecture stood blind beside her, because it had been designed by people who could not imagine a cadet remaining the master of her own fear. The pulse track completed its sweep. The water began to drain on its cycle. The human surfaced, oxygen at 41%, the lead read. Just above the floor she had clearly known the location of and drew a single controlled breath, and I understood that she had not merely survived the flooding track. She had timed her surfacing to the drain cycle and the pulse cycle both, holding herself under to the precise margin of her own physiology, trusting a number she had calculated about her own body against a machine built to murder bodies that trusted themselves. There were 4 hazards left: the low visibility intervals, the energetic track, the second projectile wall at compounded timing, and the drones. The drones were the part that frightened me, and I am Vetch, and we do not frighten easily. The 38 drones strike faster than a Vetch can track. I have seen the footage of them in test. They are not a hazard a cadet survives by skill. They are a hazard a cadet survives by not reaching, because every cadet washes out long before the drone phase. In the entire history of the Hall, the 38 drones had never engaged a living target. They had only ever struck the test dummies, and the test dummies had only ever been destroyed. The twins, Drevin and Drevek, who ran the drone division and who had not spoken since the projectile track, spoke now, both at once, the way the brood-paired sometimes do. "Pull the drones," they said. "Prefect, pull them from the sequence. They were never meant to touch a living cadet. They are calibrated to destroy, not to test. If she reaches them, they will not measure her. They will only try to kill her, and they are very good at it, and we built them, and we do not want." They stopped. I had instructed beside the twins for 30 cycles, and I had never heard their certainty crack. It cracked now. "We do not want to watch what we built kill a child, because an old man assigned her the wrong lane to teach her a lesson she did not need." "Scale the lane down," I said. I said it to Drusk, and I said it as a senior instructor invoking the cutoff authority that any of us holds. "Prefect, the drones are next. Scale the lane down. She has demonstrated the threshold finding is wrong. We have the data we need. There is no instructional value in running her into the drones." Drusk did not answer. He was staring through the slit with all 4 eyes, and I realized he was not refusing me out of cruelty. He had stopped being able to act. The man had built his 40 cycles on the scale, and the scale was coming apart in front of him, and he had no procedure for what to do when the floor dissolves. "Prefect," I said again, "authorize the scale down." "On what grounds?" Drusk said, and his voice was very quiet. "On what grounds do I scale down a cadet who has not registered a single involuntary distress marker? The lane is functioning. The cadet is functioning. There are no grounds in the regulation to stop a lane that is working. If I scale it down now, I am admitting." He stopped. "Admitting what, Prefect?" "That we ran her into a lane we believed would break her on the certainty that it would break her, and that the certainty was wrong." He clicked once, a sound with no amusement in it at all. "That we built the scale to 40 as a courtesy, and that we have just learned in the most expensive possible way why the engineers stopped at 40, not because nothing could exceed it, because they could not imagine what would, and so they declined to build the lane that would measure it." The low visibility intervals ran. The chamber went dark, then strobing, then dark, the way it does to deny a cadet the use of their eyes. The human closed her eyes. She did not need them. She had the clocks now, all of them, the rhythm of the chamber held in whatever it was that her small dark head held things in, and she moved through the blindness on the timing she had already solved, untouched, while our instruments tracked her by heat and told us she had not slowed. The second projectile wall ran at compounded timing, 2 tracks layered, the cruelest geometry the lane possesses short of the drones. She found a new dead cone. She found it in the gap, the way she found everything, and I stopped being able to tell myself that the first dead cone had been luck, because no creature finds 2 dead cones by luck in a chamber. It entered for the first time 11 minutes ago. And then the drones initialized. I have tried many times to describe what the drone phase looked like, and I have never found words that do not sound like a lie. The 38 drones move faster than a vetch can track. This is not a figure of speech. I am a warrior instructor of the Blue Chitinous caste, and the drones moved faster than my eyes could follow, 4 of them, in the small chamber, on strike vectors computed to converge on a target that could not possibly survive the convergence. The human survived the convergence. She did not survive it by moving faster than the drones. Nothing moves faster than the drones. She survived it by moving before them, by reading, in the instant the drones initialized, the geometry of their strike solution, and placing her body in the one position from which all 4 converging vectors would, if she held still at the final moment, cause the drones to arrive at the same point in space at the same instant. And then she dropped. She dropped below the convergence point in the last fraction of a second, and the 4 drones, committed to their strike solution, computed to converge on where she had been, arrived at the same point in space at the same instant with nothing between them but each other. They struck each other, all four. In the small chamber at 38 speed, the four drones built to be untrackable destroyed themselves on the convergence point that a small, soft creature had baited them into by understanding their targeting better than the people who built them. I have run that footage slowed, too, more than any other part. At 1/40th speed you can watch the drones commit. There is a moment, after a strike drone commits to its vector and before it arrives, where the vector cannot be changed. The drones are too fast to correct, and the engineers built them that way on purpose, because a drone that can correct can be baited and a drone that cannot correct cannot. That was the design philosophy. Commitment as a virtue, unbaitable because uncorrectable. And the human had looked at four uncorrectable drones and understood the thing the engineers had not. That uncorrectable means predictable, and predictable means baitable by anyone willing to be the bait. She made herself the convergence point. She stood where all four committed vectors would resolve, and she held there until the drones could no longer change course, until commitment had become inevitability. And then in the last fraction she removed herself from the inevitability and left it to resolve on nothing, on itself, on the four committed weapons that now had nowhere to arrive but each other. The thing the engineers had built to be unbaitable, she had baited with her own body, and a fraction of a second of nerve that I do not have, that no vetch I have ever instructed has, that I am no longer certain exists anywhere in the instructed galaxy, outside the small calm creatures from the world we filed under a number and never read. The chamber went still. I have stood in many silent rooms in 41 cycles. I have never stood in a silence like the one at that observation slit. 9 senior instructors of the vetch caste, who measure and record and cull, who hold the scale that the galaxy is steadier for, stood at the wall and could not speak, because the thing we had just watched did not fit inside the scale, and we had nothing in our long exact lives to set against it. The lane lead found his voice first. "Lane complete," he said, and the words came out wrong, too small for what they meant. "Cadet has completed the 38 lane. No hazard contact, no medical floor intervention, no involuntary distress markers recorded for the duration." He looked up. "Prefect. She completed a lane no one has ever run, and the medical floor has nothing logged because at no point was she ever in danger by the only measure our instruments understand. She was never out of control, not for 1 second of it." Drusk Maravan said nothing. He was looking at the human through the slit. She stood in the center of the chamber in the settling quiet, water still draining off her at the ankles, the wreckage of 4 drones scattered around her, and she was not triumphant. That is the part I most need the conservatory to record. She was not triumphant. She did not look up at the slit where she knew we were watching and demand acknowledgement. She did not gesture at the wreckage. She stood and she got her breathing fully back to its baseline, and then she looked around the chamber once more. The same flat, methodical sweep, left to right, top to bottom, the inventory she had taken when she entered. And I understood she was confirming the chamber was inert before she relaxed, because of course she was, because that is what someone does who has never in her life been able to assume a chamber is finished trying to kill her. A Class 19 origin world. The old survey number meant nothing to me that morning. It meant something now. I had assumed, as we all assumed, that the colonials came to us soft and proud from soft worlds. I had stood at the slit and watched a creature solve 5 independent lethal timing tracks in parallel, locate 2 dead cones and a thermal seam on first exposure, calculate the precise margin of her own physiology against a flooding trap, and bait 4 untrackable drones into mutual destruction. And only afterward did the number Class 19 arrange itself in my mind into the thing it had always meant, and that we had been too certain to read. She had not learned any of this at our academy. She had walked in with it. The lane had not taught her anything. The lane had merely been the first place in her life that anyone had bothered to measure what her world had already built into her, and it had measured it badly, because we had built our largest ruler too short and called the shortness a courtesy. I pulled the survey file that night when I could not rest. A Class 19 environment, under the old designation system, is a world where the median life expectancy of an unaugmented sapient at the time of survey was measured not in decades, but in the single digits. A world whose weather kills, whose biosphere predates and poisons, whose ground itself opens and closes on a geological temper that grants no warning a soft species could heed. The survey team that cataloged her world had recommended it be quarantined as uninhabitable, and the recommendation had been filed and forgotten, because the survey was old, and the rim is large, and no one revisits a world cataloged uninhabitable. No one had revisited it. And in the cycle since the survey filed its recommendation and moved on, the things living on that uninhabitable world had not been informed that they were impossible. They had simply gone on living there, generation after generation, each one shaped a little harder by the world that was supposed to have killed them, until the world that killed soft things in single-digit years produced, as a matter of course, as an ordinary unremarkable daughter of an ordinary unremarkable line, the creature who walked into my hall and corrected our arithmetic on a lane that had never been survived. We had not measured her wrong because our instruments were poor. Our instruments were excellent. We had measured her wrong because we had filed her world under a number that meant uninhabitable, and never once considered what a world like that might inhabit it back. They opened the staging cell. The human walked out into the corridor where the senior instructors were already filing down from the observation deck, drawn by something none of us would have named, to look at her with our own eyes instead of through the slit. She was smaller in person than she had seemed in the chamber. The top of her head did not reach my thorax. Drusk Maravan stood in front of her, the hall prefect, gray at the mandible hinge, who had assigned her the lane as a lesson, and for a long moment the old exact man could not find a single word. "Cadet," he managed finally, "the lane you completed was rated threshold 38. It has never been completed. The scale on which it sits ends at 40. He stopped, started again, and I heard the cost of it in his voice, the cost of an exact man saying a true thing that unmade his floor. Our placement engine could not generate a threshold value for you. It returned the field blank. I assumed an error. I assigned you the 38 lane to correct what I believed was your pride. The word would not come for a moment. I was incorrect." The human looked up at him. There was still nothing in her face that I could read as anger, and I had stopped by then, attributing that to ignorance. The absence of anger was not ignorance. It was the same thing it had been the whole run. She was not someone who needed to make us feel her power. She had no use for our fear. She had a use for our accuracy, and only that. "Your engine didn't error," she said. "It returned blank because your scale doesn't go high enough to hold the number, and it's built to leave the field empty instead of giving you a wrong value. That's good engineering, actually. Better than most. It told you the truth. It said it couldn't measure me. You read the truth as a mistake." She paused. "That's on you, not the engine." Drusk said nothing. "Your 38 lane has 3 calibration faults," the human went on, in the flat colonial way, as if she were reporting equipment status to a maintenance log, which I understood after a moment was exactly what she believed she was doing. "Your projectile track has a damper dead cone at the inner wall, a hand's width, but it's there, and it means the track isn't actually rated to 38 at that position. It's rated to about 29. Your thermal gradient has a survivable seam where the 2 zones meet. The seam's been there since you built it. Your spec just assumed nobody could find it in the gap, and the assumption isn't a property of the lane, it's a property of who you tested on. Your medical floor only catches involuntary distress, which means it doesn't protect anyone who stays in control of their own fear. You should fix that one first. Someday you'll run a cadet who's calm and in real danger at the same time, and your floor will watch them die and log nothing, because it's looking for panic instead of looking for harm." She held out her hand. In it was a folded slip. She had been carrying a stylus and a notation slip into the lane, which no cadet does, which I had not even thought to flag, and she had been taking notes in the gaps between hazards, correcting our numbers while she solved our lane. I think of that more than almost anything else. Not that she survived the lane, that she had the spare attention, in the gaps between hazards built to kill her, to document the lane's faults for the benefit of the people running it. She had treated her own attempted murder as a quality assurance pass. The hazards had been, to her, not threats to be feared but instruments to be evaluated. And a poorly calibrated instrument is a thing you note and report so that the next operator does not trust a bad reading. Your tolerances are on there, she said. The real ones, for the lane as it's actually built, not as you spec'd it. You've been running cadets against the spec numbers for a generation. Some of the ones you washed out probably should have passed, and some of the ones you passed were closer to dead than your numbers told you. I'd rerun the certifications you're least sure about. She set the slip in Drusk's hand because he had not moved to take it. I'm not telling you this to be difficult. I'm telling you because you'll keep putting cadets in that chamber, and the chamber's been lying to you, and they're the ones who'll pay for it. Fix the floor first. And then she did the thing that I will carry to my own deactivation. She looked around the corridor full of senior vetch instructors, the exact men of the blue chitinous caste who had stood at the slit, and clicked our dry amusement at the soft, proud colonial about to learn the scale, and she did not gloat, and she did not threaten, and she did not ask whether she had passed. She simply asked the only question that, to her, the morning had ever been about. When's the next lane? She said. I'd like to run the 40 before the calibration data goes stale. It'll be more useful to you if it's from the same week. Drusk Maravan looked at the slip in his hand. He looked at the small creature who had asked to run, voluntarily, the only lane in the hall higher than the one that had never been survived, so that our numbers would be fresher. And the old prefect who had instructed before my egg was laid, who had built his whole exact life on a scale that ended at 40 because the engineers could not imagine what would exceed it, did something I had never seen a hall prefect do in 41 cycles. He lowered his head, the full bow, all 4 eyes to the floor, the obeisance the vetch reserved for the caste mothers and the war dead. He held it, and when he straightened he said, in a voice scraped down to its hinges, "There is no 40 lane, cadet. We built the hall to 40 as a courtesy. The lane stops at 38 because the engineers declined to build something they could not picture a use for." He looked at the slip. "We will build the 40. We will build it to your tolerances. And I would ask, I have no standing to ask, but I will ask that you let us record how you run it. Not to test you. We are past testing you. To learn. The galaxy has been measuring your species with a ruler we made too short and calling the shortness a courtesy, and I would like to stop being wrong before I deactivate." The human considered this. "All right," she said. "Build it accurate. If it's accurate, I'll run it." She turned to go and then stopped and looked back at the corridor of instructors, and for the first and only time something moved in her flat, unalarming face that I could read, and it was not pride and it was not contempt, and it took me a long time afterward to name it. It was a kind of patience. The patience of someone who has spent her whole life being measured short by people too certain to look, and has decided, against all the evidence of her mourning, to give them one more chance to get the number right. "For what it's worth," she said, "I wasn't trying to make a point. I just wanted to know where I stood. That's all anybody wants from a scale. You don't make it bigger to flatter anyone. You make it bigger because the thing you're measuring is real whether your ruler admits it or not." She looked at Drusk's slip one more time. "Fix the floor first," she said again. And she walked out down the corridor, the smallest creature in the manifest, past 9 instructors of the blue chitinous caste who stood and let her pass and did not click. I am setting this down because the conservatory asked, and because the official record says only that Cadet Origin Class 19 completed the Threshold 38 lane without medical floor intervention and submitted calibration corrections subsequently verified as accurate. That is true. It is all true. It does not say that we put her in that lane to break her, on the certainty that she could be broken. the way we had broken 10,000 before her. It does not say that the certainty was the whole architecture of our cast, and that it came apart at an observation slit in 11 minutes. It does not say that the most dangerous thing in the thrashing hall that day was never in the chamber. It was standing at the wall, 9 of us, holding a ruler too short and calling our blindness a mercy. We built the 40 lane. It took the better part of a cycle, and the engineers who built it did not enjoy the work, because every measurement they took was a measurement of how short the old courtesy had been. They built it to the tolerances on her slip, the real ones, and where her corrections ran past the spec, they trusted her corrections over their own instruments, which is a thing engineers do not do and which they did, because the alternative was to keep being wrong on purpose. She ran it the following week, and the calibration held, and we were finally, for the first time in the history of the hall, measuring the real thing instead of the limit of our own imagination. She certified out of our academy with a rating the engine still cannot generate, and she went forward to the line, where I am told the numbers she carries are the kind that other species write home about and do not believe. The twins did not stay to see the 40 lane built. Drevin and Drevek resigned their commissions within the cycle, as I said they would. They told the prefect, in their joint resignation, that they had spent 30 cycles building weapons calibrated to destroy on the certainty that nothing they instructed could survive being destroyed, and that the certainty had been the whole of their craft, and that a craft built on a certainty that was wrong was not a craft they could keep practicing. I do not blame them. I have thought in the worst hours about resigning myself. I did not. I stayed because someone who had watched it had to stay and fix the floor, and Melu was too old and too broken by it to do the work, and so the work fell to me. I fixed the floor first. It catches harm now, not panic. We have not lost a cadet since. I think about that more than I think about the drones. The slip is still in the hall archive. The tolerances on it are in her hand, small and exact, written in the gaps of a lane that was supposed to kill her, by a creature who treated her own near murder as a calibration exercise and corrected our arithmetic on the way out the door. The engineers who built the 40 lane studied the slip for a long time. One of them asked me quietly what she had been like, whether she had been afraid. We keep the slip under glass now, not as a trophy but as a discipline. Every new instructor who joins the hall is brought to it in their first week and made to read it, and made to understand that it was written by a child we put in a lane to break, and that the breaking we were so certain of never came, and that the certainty itself was the most dangerous instrument in the building. I bring them to the glass myself. I tell them the same thing every time. The scale is a good tool. Trust it. And the day it returns a blank field, do not assume it has failed. Assume it has finally met something it was built too small to hold, and build a bigger ruler and bow. I told him the truth. I told him she had not been afraid, and that I had spent the whole run mistaking that for ignorance, the way you do, the way we all did. And then I told him the thing I had finally understood, standing at the slit in that long, unbearable silence, that I have never stopped understanding since. She was not unafraid because she did not know the danger. She knew the danger better than we did. She had read it down to the dead cones and the thermal seams and the precise oxygen margin of her own held breath. She was unafraid because fear to her was simply one more variable, and she had learned, on a world we had filed away under a number and never looked at again, to hold it the way she held everything else, separately, calmly, and in full. We are an exact people. We thought that made us the measure of things. We were only ever the ruler, she was the length.